Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to Flip Spiceland, too, who's at the Weather Center now. Flip.
Happy New Year to you folks. We have not exchanged those pleasantries yet this millennium, have we?
But we've been a little busy around
We have been indeed. Let's take a look at our map. We'll start in the United States. Jonathan earlier mentioned that this is the weather for the first day of the millennium. We realize some of you watching, it is already the second day of the new millennium. We'll try to work our way around the globe to you. There's a little bit of rainfall in the Great Lakes area expected this evening, but what is significant about that is that it is rainfall, not snowfall. Here we are in winter in the U.S. and talking about rainfall in the Great Lakes, not snow. Snowfall in the mountains of Arizona today. A weather system rolls in through western Canada, producing some snowfall in Washington and Oregon, some rainfall here in the coastal areas. But the big news in North America, and really the northern hemisphere in general, the very warm temperatures, particularly so in the southeastern portion of the United States. There is an influx of cold air sliding down through the western U.S. We move on now to the European continent, where really most of the bad weather has been, but that has been dwindling away. This storm system came rolling across yesterday. Perhaps if you were watching our live coverage, you saw a few showers across London, but again, that storm weakening somewhat. And then another cold front is stretching across the British Isles to bring some clouds into Scotland and Ireland. We look now at our forecast for high temperatures, and again, relatively warm for this time of year throughout all of not just Europe, not just North America, but all of the northern hemisphere. And of course, in the southern hemisphere, it is summertime. So we're looking at an area of high pressure bringing typical summertime weather to Rio and Montevideo too. Widely scattered showers and afternoon convection throughout the Amazon River Valley. Here's a look at your forecast for high temperatures. Rio will see a high of 30 on the Celsius scale, 86 Fahrenheit. Buenos Aires up to 31 on the Celsius scale. Have yourself a wonderful first day of the new year. In some places, the second day. Now back to Natalie.
Thanks, Flip. Next on Millennium 2000, the race to complete the most complicated map in the world.
They are mapping you, and it will change your life. We'll have that next.
And now, a simple question for everyone who is...
Man has mapped much of the world around him and is now focusing some of his most exciting exploration inward. Medical trailblazers are taking on a huge challenge. They are mapping human DNA to discover what makes us who we are. As CNN medical correspondent Eileen O'Connor explains, unlocking these mysteries could open a Pandora's box.
Francis Collins is a government scientist. Craig Venter used to be a government scientist. They prefer different modes of transport, both recreationally and scientifically, but both are racing towards the same goal, mapping the very stuff that makes each of us unique, our DNA. Collins sees the mapping of the human genome, as it is called, as an end in itself.
This is, in fact, our most significant adventure in science as a species, reading our own blueprint.
Venter as merely a beginning.
People talk about this being a race all the time. This is a race to the starting line. You've heard Francis Collins and others say this is the most important thing that science has ever done, more important than going to the moon. I don't agree with that. I think it's important, but what will really determine its importance is what all of us do with this information.
It is information detailing every aspect of our very existence, and each of us has a unique and total accounting. Inside every cell in your body is a nucleus that contains a complete set of DNA, twisted within 46 chromosomes. Unravel those and you get a long, double-stranded thread. That's the DNA. Within that are some 80,000 genes that tell each cell which proteins to make. It's those proteins that determine what a cell will be, what it will do, and how well it will do it. In other words, those bits of DNA called genes direct our cells. They determine whether our eyes are blue, our hair is brown, or our skin is black. Those same genes also determine whether our cells will function normally or not, whether we will get sick. For instance, there is a gene that determines how well the body processes cholesterol, and therefore how likely you may be to suffer from blocked arteries. Scientists believe they have found genes in animals that control appetite and hunger signals to the brain. That gene clearly plays a role in how much people tend to eat and how fat they may get. It's the DNA in the gene that will determine if a person's brain cells will malfunction, creating the conditions for a disease like Alzheimer's. 4 chemicals make up the DNA in our genes that tell the cell what to do. Scientists have assigned them 4 letters. A is for adenine, T for thymine, G for guanine, and C for cytosine. A always pairs with T and G always pairs with C to form that double strand of DNA. How those letters are sequenced or ordered determines each person's unique DNA, the letters of our own book of life.
To the biologist, this is it. This is the book of life. This is where all the secrets are going to be found if we can figure out how to read that code.
But merely reading the code is no easy task. There are 3 billion of these lettered pairings in the human genome. Not all of these pairings make up genes. To map the human genome, government labs are taking DNA from an anonymous donor and looking at it line by line, letter by letter.
To read it, you have to do a chemical reaction.
That chemical reaction forces the 4 chemicals that make up the DNA chain, A, C, T, and G, to identify themselves through color. To do this, Colin's team cuts the DNA into tiny fragments, then clones or copies them, which is what is happening on these plates here. Only after that are the copied DNA snippets treated with special chemicals and gels. Each chemical letter of the genetic code reacts differently to the chemicals that have been added. The reaction creates different colored beacons on all the snippets that are then fed into the computer and read.
You have to load it onto the sequencing machine, which are gadgets like those over there and others in this building that actually then produce the data, which is a series of colored fluorescent signals coming off the bottom of a gel.
The green is A, the blue is C, the red is T, and the yellow is G. So I bet you could even read that genetic code now. So there's...
Yeah, so what was green?
Craig Venter is using a similar method, but he is mapping the DNA of 5 donors at once, instead of just one person's, piece by piece, as Collins is doing. He believes his method is faster and will yield better information for doctors through comparing the DNA of each donor.
So you can see each one of those little tiny colored bars is one of the letters of genetic code. So this is the human DNA from one of our genetic donors here.
Can it be just one of those little letters that can cause a disease?
Just one of those differences. See that green A there? If that ended up being a blue peak of a C, that could be contributing to the cause of a disease. Or the difference between having dark hair versus having no hair.
Funded by private companies, Venter vows to finish the human genome by next summer.
With all these robots, we can pick over 12,000 clones an hour. And each of those spots has one piece of the human genome in it.
Oh my God, this is incredible. There's... How many computers are here?
If you just look down here at the hundreds of machines working, each one generating thousands of letters of genetic code automatically every hour around the clock.
Yeah.
You can see why we've been able to get over 80% of the human genetic code starting in September 8th.
300 machines costing some $300,000 apiece. That's $90 million. Added to this supercomputer, the biggest in private hands, makes this a costly venture.
This computer facility would be enough to run any country in the world.
Still, Venter says they are spending far less than the $3 billion the government has budgeted.
We have found ourselves in a circumstance of being able to say it's doable faster than you thought, and it's costing less than you thought it would.
Francis Collins likes to brag even to scientists at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, who are part of his team, that the government project is also under budget and will now bring in a working draft this spring, well before their earlier deadline of 2005. That means the government's new projected completion is the same as Venter's. Yet Collins denies that Venter's entry into what neither likes to call a race has moved up the target date.
Help me with the whole problem of patenting genomic sequences.
But Collins does tell doctors at Baylor that Venter's practice of filing preliminary patent applications on some 6,500 DNA sequences so far has spurred him on. Doctors are concerned about this issue of who owns the right to the information in each decoded sequence. Their worry is that protracted legal battles will slow down the research necessary to achieve medical therapies.
A lot of the really interesting experiments are not going to be one gene at a time. They're going to look at the whole genome. And if we start putting up barriers to that, we're going to slow down the process. So hence our motivation for taking the stance we have and for hurrying up, trying to get it all out there in the public domain.
The government is trying to make this information public domain by posting it immediately on its website, updating every 24 hours as the sequences come off the machines. These kinds of patent applications have become increasingly common. The U.S. Patent Office says ultimately it will be up to the courts to decide whether anyone other than mankind can own a piece of the human genome.
The court system will find that medium for us, and I think the system itself will find that medium for us. I think our position is that genes and ESTs are patentable so long as they meet the legal requirements which have been laid down.
Venter's company called Solera has its own website, open to paying subscribers, mostly pharmaceutical companies for now. While Venter is protective of trade secrets, meeting at times behind closed doors, he says patents aren't about protecting secrecy, that they are the only way to protect and provide the motivation for pharmaceutical company partners to spend the millions needed for further research in developing drugs from this knowledge.
Patents are the means that give the pharmaceutical industry a reasonable period of protection to invest the billions of dollars they have to develop new drugs.
Bill Hazeltine is also a firm believer in patents. He is using them to generate investment money in his company, Human Genome Sciences. Hazeltine is already developing drugs based on some of the genes from the human genome. Drugs like VEGF2, which can grow new blood vessels in heart patients, alleviating closed arteries, and a kind of second skin, a plaster applied to an open wound to accelerate the healing process. But unlike Venter, he does not believe mapping the entire human genome is all that useful.
What the Human Genome Project will uncover is 90%, 97% junk DNA. And the parts of the genes they'll find are genes we've already found.
Instead of decoding all the DNA, Hazeltine has been looking at just the genes and how they function. That's only about 5% of the total DNA. By doing that, he says he is moving more quickly towards these kinds of drugs that harness the healing power of certain genes. He says mapping the entire genome is nice, but shouldn't be the first priority.
It is a good scientific infrastructure project, but it is not immediately applicable to medicine.
Both Collins and Venter see it much differently.
The part in between the genes, much of it will be involved in regulation, in telling a gene whether it's supposed to be on or off in your liver or your blood cell. So we really need to understand the parts that aren't in the genes themselves if we want to understand risks of disease and how to manage them.
Venter says by being able to compare our differences throughout the entire genetic code, doctors will be able to develop individualized drugs to treat disease.
So the pharmacy in the future will base the drugs that you get based on your genetic code, so you don't get ones that could be toxic to you. Right now, that's done totally randomly. We don't know who it's going to work on and who it won't. That's the biggest thing that's going to change in the future.
Doctors will also be able to predict what disease, like heart disease and certain kinds of cancer, a person may develop later in life, which could be used to help patients prevent those illnesses. Trouble is, it could also be used against individuals as a reason to deny someone employment or health insurance.
I feel very strongly that you're the only one that should own your genetic code. We want that to empower individuals, not empower companies or governments.
Collins preaches much the same thing. He too thinks before this genie is let out of the bottle, Congress must act and pass privacy laws.
This vision of gene-based medicine can only come to pass if the public becomes confident that finding out genetic information is a safe activity for them.
That isn't Francis Collins' only concern, for it is clear that reading nature's genetic blueprint will allow man to alter nature's intended plan.
Genetics is enormously powerful to give hope to people who currently don't have that hope, because we don't understand their diseases and we don't know what to do for them, and ultimately that's all of us. But it also is possible for this kind of knowledge to be used in ways that we would all recoil from, and collectively, I think, as society, we're responsible for trying to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Venter again agrees. The time is now, he says, to set up the parameters before the power behind this knowledge is unleashed.
It's not the knowledge, it's not the technology, the tools, the computers. It's what we believe as society is moral and what we're going to do with this information. So this is the time to have the discussions.
Eileen O'Connor, CNN, Washington.
It's amazing stuff, and our look at this remarkable research poised to change all of our lives continues with Dr. Craig Venter.
We will ask him what he's learning about us and how he plans to use that information when we come back.
The discovery of DNA was made by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953.
Proliferation of discoveries about the genetic contributions to diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure and schizophrenia and multiple sclerosis and on down the list. The most immediate consequences will be diagnostics, where you and I can find out, if we wish to know that information, what our own individual risks are for future illness. Those will not be precise risks that say, oh, well, you're going to get this disease on your 45th birthday. But they will be relative risks. And they will be very useful for many of those circumstances where we have good ideas about how to reduce the risk if you know what disease specifically is lurking there in your DNA.
Thousands of diseases that can damage the quality of life or cut life short have genetic components. Once those genes are identified, medicine will have made the first crucial step toward a cure.
Understanding human genes gives us a powerful set of new tools to address medical problems, either to create new chemical drugs to treat diseases, or to use the genes and the substances they make, proteins, as medicine themselves.
I think by 20 years from now, gene therapy will have revolutionized medicine. Every major disease will have gene therapy as a treatment option, and millions of lives will have been saved.
In gene therapy, malfunctioning genes are replaced by healthy ones. The healthy genes are delivered into the cells of various organs using a virus. The main challenge has been to find a virus that safely carries the healthy genes to the right cells. Sometimes the virus misses its target or creates side effects in the patient. Researchers are still trying to determine what killed 18-year-old Jesse Gelsinger. Gelsinger, who had a rare liver disorder, died in September at the University of Pennsylvania, where he was participating in a gene therapy trial. That death placed a caution light on further trials, but researchers remain optimistic that gene therapy will save lives in the 21st century.
In the longer term, these gene discoveries will lead us to a whole new level in terms of drug development. And we will have therapies, both drug therapies and gene therapies, for diseases that we currently don't successfully treat.
So does that mean we will someday look back on breast cancer or Tay-Sachs the way we now look back on polio?
I think that we are 10 to 20 years away from that happening. It will happen. We will get over our current difficulties, and we will have ways to change genetic destiny.
But genetic diseases are only one category of disease. Experts say one of the greatest threats to humanity in the 21st century will be an increased frequency and severity of infectious diseases and superbugs.
There's always the threat of a new and emerging epidemic, and those of us in the public health field are particularly concerned about the capability of the influenza virus to emerge in a deadly fashion, as it did in 1918, where it caused over 20 million deaths worldwide and up to 750,000 deaths in the United States.
Since its discovery, 16.3 million people have died from AIDS. Although the spread of the disease has been stemmed in many parts of the world, it is decimating Africa. 69% of the 34 million people infected with HIV worldwide live in sub-Saharan Africa. In the United States, 60% of hospital infections are caused by drug-resistant microbes, which kill 14,000 people each year.
A classic superbug is a multiple drug-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Another superbug is a multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis. So you give it the terminology superbug when it has overcome man's attempts to suppress it by what we usually suppress them with, namely antimicrobials.
Over the past 2 decades, over 30 new and emerging infectious diseases have been identified in humans. Hantavirus, a virus spread by rodents, infected over 50 people. More than 2/3 died. Last summer, the West Nile virus mysteriously appeared in the U.S., where it had never been seen before. It was carried by birds from New York and spread to the southeastern United States. Certainly, the shrinking world has made it difficult to contain infectious disease. As human beings have become more mobile, millions of us traveling from continent to continent and shipping our livestock and food around the world, the natural barriers that used to contain disease have become irrelevant, broken down by ships and airplanes. Disease travels too.
The fact that we live in a global community where there's travel back and forth, where you can have someone be in Africa one day and be in the west coast of the United States literally the next day, or in certain countries in Asia and go around the world, that means that any infection or any disease in any part of the world can be transmitted to another part of the world under any certain circumstances.
So what hope do we have to contain or cure these kinds of diseases? Hospital infections could be dramatically reduced if hospital staff were more vigilant about hand washing. The CDC and NIH are currently working on new vaccines for AIDS and other infectious diseases. But new hope may once again be found in genetics.
If we know the sequences of their genomes, then we'll have a basic blueprint of their genetic code. And from that blueprint, we'll be able to understand how that organism can live or cohabit in our bodies.
The ultimate goal, of course, is to wipe out all diseases, to never again see a child struggle with muscular dystrophy or leukemia, a man in his 60s lose his mind to Alzheimer's disease, a teenager die randomly from a mysterious bacteria or virus. The dawn of the 21st century finds us closer to that goal than we could ever have imagined. But hope can brighten or dim depending on where you live. The quality of health care around the world varies wildly. As medical science advances, there is no doubt new cures and treatments will be discovered. The next challenge will be to distribute them to everyone who needs them. Dr. Steve Salvatore, CNN, New York.
We're going to pause briefly here, but when we come back, 21st Century Solutions, a conversation with experts from the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, and Human Genome Sciences about the breakthroughs that are happening and the ones that lie ahead. Stay with us.
In the last decade, more than 50 new viruses were identified.
Oh, I feel like I'm 18 again.
Yeah, me too. You'd think I'd feel awful after blowing our retirement money.
What?
Yeah, it's gone.
All of it?
Yeah, I decided to invest our money by myself.
What are we gonna live on?
Hey, fresh air, sunshine, what else do we need? You know, money is highly overrated.
Next time, don't go it alone. Ask your financial advisor about the fund so many financial experts choose. Alliance Capital, the investment professional's choice.
The Goodwill Games are coming to TNT. Chevy Trucks proudly presents the world's best.
People that do mogul skiing are fun-loving people that like to push themselves to the extremes. Going into the jumps, it's always a little scary because you got this big thing in front of you that you're just throwing your body off of. It's a crazy feeling. You're just like, ooh, I'm way up here. You have to have a pretty low fear factor so that you dare push the speed, you dare try new stuff. It can be really scary.
The 2000 Winter Goodwill Games, where the world's best prove it. Coming in February to TNT.
20 years now. Where'd they go?
Need help with those?
I can do it. 20 years. I don't know.
I mean, you just caught an edge. It happens.
I sit and I wonder sometimes.
Year after year, it's good to have someone you can depend on. Chevy Truck. The one the U.S. ski team depends on.
Well, when I got hurt and missed work, thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac. Well, even the best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac. Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac!
In the past 25 years, the average life expectancy has increased by 9 years.
The Human Genome Project that we've been talking about today holds out an amazing prospect. Science has found the instruction manual that explains every cell in our species. Doctors just don't understand it yet. But there is progress there, and there is progress of many kinds elsewhere as well. We're going to talk about that now with three guests. From Southampton, New York, William Haseltine, who appeared in our preceding report. He's founder and CEO of a company called Human Genome Sciences. Joining us from Geneva, Switzerland, Dr. David Heyman, Executive Director of the World Health Organization's Communicable Diseases Cluster. And from here in Atlanta, Dr. Jeffrey Copeland, Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. Doctors, we thank you all for being with us. Let's start with you, Dr. Heyman in Geneva, but I'm going to invite everyone who's here with us, and Natalie here on the set with me, to jump in if you have a thought or two. Dr. Heyman, where are the real medical miracles today? Where are the breakthroughs being effected? Where are the extraordinary cures that excite people like you?
Well, the cures and the tools necessary to prevent infectious diseases are with us today. What we have to do is muster the political will and also the financial support to use these tools better to stop the infectious diseases which are occurring worldwide.
Jeffrey Copeland, the point is well taken. Money matters, but it's also a question of science and of scientific success. Where are the big successes now?
I think we're seeing one right now around the world in our efforts for polio eradication. Dr. Heyman and his organization are leading the way in this. But we expect by the end of next year to have eliminated polio as a scourge around the world. This involves both the scientific know-how to do it, which we have, public health will, and as Dr. Heyman said, the political will to get it done.
Why don't we go now to Southampton? Dr. Haseltine, you're working on a whole new kind of drugs. Are we about to see a whole new kind of medical care because of them?
Yes, we are. And in answer to your first question, 1999 has been a breakthrough year for medicine. We've seen an unprecedented explosion in our knowledge of infectious diseases at their most intimate level, the level of their complete gene sequence. We have a very accurate blueprint of human genes, and that knowledge is now seeping through our universities, our pharmaceutical companies, the biotechnology companies, and we are witnessing a true revolution in the making. That's not to underestimate the importance of distribution of current medical practice throughout the world. We're in great need of the World Health Organization, surveillance of the CDC, and distributing what we now know. We can make a much healthier world just on what we know today, but the future is even more exciting.
I'm struck by what you're telling us, Dr. Haseltine, because we've been talking about gene research for an hour now, and you sound like the most optimistic voice that we're hearing from.
Well, I'm extremely optimistic based on the knowledge that we have. We have actually taken some of these breakthroughs and have them in patients, human beings, being treated right now with some of these genomic breakthroughs. We're trying to restructure and regrow blood vessels in the human heart to make coronary bypass surgery irrelevant. We're trying to heal the skin of patients with these chronic wounds that don't heal. We're trying to shield the body from the devastating effects of chemotherapy. Those are things that are happening today. And we also hope very soon to be introducing new drugs to stimulate the immune system to help fight off some of those infections that are resistant to antibiotics. So I'm extremely optimistic about the near term as well as the long-term future, as long as we have the right medical infrastructure, not only in the developed world, but in the developing world as well.
Quick follow-up on that point, the future, Dr. Haseltine. This is Natalie. You have said in the past, and I quote, death is a series of preventable diseases. That said, and with this research and your optimism, let's talk about life expectancy in the next 100 years. Where could that go?
Well, first of all, let's start with the last 100 years. In developed worlds, life expectancy is just about doubled. We're now living, on average, twice as long as people born in the last century. And I think the next century can add another 50 or 60 years to the average lifespan. So the average person can live a full natural lifespan of 100 to 120. And I think eventually we can do better than that. But for now, I think we can keep our sight on bringing everybody's longevity up to those of us who can live the longest, which is about 120 years.
Let's go to Geneva, because once again, I'm struck by the different voices that we're hearing. One doctor who says that technology and research is really going to change everything, and other voices that say technology really isn't the answer. Is there nothing on the research front, is there nothing that gene research, Dr. Heyman, offers the kind of people and the kind of diseases that the WHO is seeing?
Well, I'll come back to what I said earlier. We do have the drugs and we do have the vaccines today to get rid of the majority of infectious diseases. Infectious diseases today are very unequally distributed in the world. If you look in low-income countries, you'll see that of all the deaths that occur in those countries, 45% are still due to infectious diseases. If you look at the population which is economically productive, those people under the age of 46 years of age, you'll find that of those dying, 48% die of infectious diseases. And 90% of those deaths are due to 6 infectious diseases: tuberculosis, malaria, diarrheal diseases, pneumonia, measles, and AIDS. Diseases for which we have vaccines or good drugs or preventive measures. So we must better use those tools and get rid of infectious disease deaths today.
While we hear about these very serious threats and these terrible diseases, authorities in the United States can take pride in the fact that many of these diseases were in the U.S. and were essentially cured, weren't they, Dr. Copeland?
We have gained 40 years of life over the course of this century. But if we were sitting around now in 1900 and we were saying, what are our big targets, what are our big challenges, what do we need to do, we would have not guessed many of the things that have come up over this century that we've had to deal with and that have ended up being health problems. In 1900, we would have named infectious diseases, workplace hazards, safe pregnancies and childbirth, and we've done a terrific job at controlling those in the United States over these years, amongst other things. But some of the things we wouldn't have anticipated were the tremendous toll that tobacco would have taken on our health, the role of automobiles and collisions and injuries and deaths from those over this century. We wouldn't have considered dental health to be something to concern ourselves with. And so we can't be so smart now as to say we're going to anticipate all the things that are going to come up, because many of them are of our own making. And so human behavior plays a huge role in our health, in our dealings with disease, and our avoiding and preventing disease. The 40 years we've gained over the 20th century have largely been because of our efforts on prevention, not our efforts on cure.
We're going to ask our 3 doctors to stay with us. We have to stop for a moment, but when we come back, when disease turns doctors into detectives, emerging illnesses. Stay with us.
Probably you remember some of my home runs of the last season.
Today, I would like to invite you to my real home, the Dominican Republic. Now it's your turn to swing the bat and hit the home run for the most memorable vacation of your life. Come to the Dominican Republic. All Americans are welcome.
The Dominican Republic. Come, share our treasures.
When you use the Kodak Picture Maker at Walgreens Photo Center, you can make the perfect gift in less than 5 minutes. You simply print directly from your photo. You can even improve your photos by cropping, reducing red eye, or adding borders and text. Even save your new print on a floppy disk to take with you.
Plaza there, the 2000 Millennium Party there in Calgary, as we followed the Y2K rollover across Canada's time zones.
Exactly. And we want to take you all now to a place, Seattle, Washington, where there has been a mixture of planning, serious planning, and some celebratory planning, Bernie, that had to be cut back.
Let's call in Rusty Dornan for an update. Rusty.
Well, Bernie and Judy, it's a little lonely out here after watching all the Millennium Bashes around the world, thousands of people. There were supposed to be 50,000 people here at the Space Needle in Seattle. That party was canceled earlier this week. We were in a parking lot where most of the folks are sitting in their cars planning on watching the fireworks here. Kind of a sad statement to all that's happened here. So it's been rather a quiet day all in all for New Year's Eve so far in Seattle. Normally, visitors can walk right up to Seattle's Space Needle. Not on this New Year's Eve. Erected during the 1962 World's Fair, the landmark that symbolized Seattle's future and what was to have been the site of the city's greatest party will be locked up tighter than a drum.
There won't be any public access to the grounds after 6 p.m. The celebration will be completed and we'll move on.
Jubilation over the millennium overshadowed by fears of possible acts of terrorism, only weeks after violence in the streets during the World Trade Organization meetings here. Like it or not, the city has the jitters.
Oh, I think it's probably wasn't necessary, but there might be a reason for it we don't know about. You know, we were going to come down here tonight, and we're going to spend the evening at home.
50,000 were expected to gather here, a party that was over before it began.
It's just kind of sad because this morning on TV we watched all the other celebrations across the world, and here it's just kind of desolate and deserted.
Some low-key events during the day for the pleasure of a few. Now, the show will go on atop the Space Needle, as it does every year, where there will be a pyrotechnic display. They're planning on spelling out the year 2000, and we'll do that at 11:59 tonight. There will be a display of about 5 minutes. As I say, people have been gathering in areas around here, around the parking lots here, around the hills. There are several vantage points that you can see the Space Needle from various areas around the city. The biggest fear really for Seattleites has been the last couple of days whether the fog was going to lower to obscure the view, because that has happened in years past. So right now, many Seattleites are staying home. Many of them are preferring to welcome the millennium from their own backyard. Bernie and Judy.
Okay, thank you very much, Rusty Dornan. Well, as we await the beginning of the year 2000 in Las Vegas, in Los Angeles, Palo Alto, California, San Francisco, and Seattle, where Rusty just reported from, and Vancouver, British Columbia, let's look back for a moment to look at some important news developments over the past few hours. A new year is beginning in Russia with a new president at the helm. Boris Yeltsin left the Kremlin Friday, hours after he resigned from office. In a speech to the nation, Yeltsin apologized for failing to fulfill the dreams of ordinary Russians for a better life. Prime Minister Vladimir Putin will serve as acting president until elections are held in March. Currently, he leads other possible contenders in Russian opinion polls.
Meanwhile, hugs and cheers greeted former captives from a hijacked India Airlines flight. But as CNN New Delhi Bureau Chief Satinder Bindra reports, the passengers and crew tell of harrowing ordeal at the hands of their captors.
Out of a plane, into freedom, and the waiting embrace of their families. 155 passengers arrived home New Year's Eve after 8 days in captivity. Some couldn't walk. Others were too traumatized to talk. Those who did say they'll bear the scars of India's longest hijacking drama in a decade forever.
We were fearing death every day. There was intense pressure on the last day where we really thought we'll blow ourselves up. They will kill us.
One Indian, Rupan Katyal, was stabbed to death by the hijackers soon after they commandeered the plane on a routine flight from Nepal to India. Passengers say the hijackers gave them little food and kept many of them blindfolded.
They had revolvers, they had hand grenades. No, they don't have AK-47. They had time bombs also.
Fearing the hijackers would blow up the plane, India on Friday agreed to release 3 jailed Muslim rebels in exchange for the prisoners.
We feel it's worth it, because no 3 terrorists are worth the lives of 165 passengers.
Soon after releasing the passengers into the care of Indian officials in Kandahar, the hijackers left the airport in a motorcade. India says it'll try to find them and appeal to the international community for help.
The time has come for the world to confront this evil, to act in concert and crush it. The battle against terrorism can be won by all nations acting together.
At New Delhi's international airport, few were thinking about the hijackers. Passengers said the real hero was the Indian Airlines pilot, Captain Devi Sharan, for keeping calm as the hijackers forced the plane to hopscotch from India to Pakistan, to the United Arab Emirates, and finally to Afghanistan. The passengers and their relatives carried Sharan out of their terminal on their shoulders. For tearful relatives, the release of their loved ones was, they said, the best millennium gift they could ever hope for. Satinder Bindra, CNN, New Delhi.
And we'll be right back with more coverage.
Global coverage of Millennium 2000.
And that's how it looked just about 40 minutes ago in Salt Lake City, Utah, one of 7 states in the United States that now observes the year 2000. We are coming up on about 20 minutes before 3 o'clock Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific, and we'll have about 4 more states turning the clock, celebrating the new millennium, as well as Vancouver and parts of Western Canada. Meanwhile, as the world celebrates the first day of the year 2000, there are a few people celebrating their 100th birthday. CNN's John Zarella has one woman's story of the century.
This school picture was taken in 1908. The pretty little 8-year-old girl in the front row is Carolina Beck. This is Carolina Beck today. She is Sister Felicia Beck. About her life, she says humbly,
"Well, there's nothing remarkable about it."
Oh, but there is. Sister Felicia was born 100 years ago. According to the National Centenarian Awareness Project, which tracks this sort of thing, Sister Felicia is one of only 184 Americans still alive who were born January 1st, 1900.
I don't see why I should have lived this long, but it's God's will.
Raised on the family farm in Red Rock, Texas, Sister Felicia entered the convent in 1919. First, she taught school, then went into nursing. From her perspective, the most significant advances in the past 100 years all took place roughly within the first half of the 20th century.
The automobile business, they are so numerous all over the world, and that's a great advantage to the people. Also, the wash machine, the ice box, and the cooling system that we have now.
Sister Felicia lives now in San Antonio, Texas, in a retirement center for the Sisters of Divine Providence. But she hasn't slowed down.
I start with prayer and go to Mass, after that breakfast, and after that exercise, and after the exercise, well, I have little things to do in my room, but then I'll start praying again.
Since her birth, the Catholic Church has had 9 popes, and there have been 18 U.S. presidents. She has seen the world change in so many ways. But there's one change for which she's still waiting.
That we'll have peace in the world.
That, she says, would be humanity's greatest achievement. John Zarella, CNN, reporting.
Well, we're certainly happy that she has made it to her, or is making it today to her 100th birthday.
One bit of information earlier, Carl Rochelle was reporting from the FAA Center there at Herndon, Virginia. The FAA now tells CNN that the automated weather observation systems, there were 12 or less in Iowa, are sending weather reports to the national system. They're doing that because they're back online. Nothing major.
We're going to take a break. We are just 16 minutes away from Pacific time zone turning to midnight. We'll be right back.
coverage of Millennium 2000, only on CNN.
President Gerald Ford, Jay Leno, President Bill Clinton, Mike Wallace, President Ronald Reagan, Jerry Seinfeld, Michael Jordan, Tom Cruise, George Clooney, Queen Noor, Tom Hanks, Dan Rather, Hillary Clinton, Celine Dion, Bette Midler.
No wonder he's #1 in primetime talk. Great guests, great talk. Larry King Live, weeknights on CNN. Millennium 2000 special, Dr. Steve Salvatore discusses the possibilities of a cure for everything and looks at the challenges of disease prevention worldwide on the network of the Millennium, CNN.
You go to great effort to keep your body in shape. But where do you go to give your mind a workout? Go to the World Today and get the best of CNN in one power-packed hour. Daily news, money news, an in-depth look at the most important issues today. Watch the World Today and exercise the most important muscle of all, your brain. CNN, you are what you know.
Ever since man learned to communicate, there's been the need to learn how to cut to the chase. USA Today. Not the most words, just the right ones.
So much more to come. California, Nevada, Washington State, Vancouver, British Columbia, as our coverage continues.
We are getting to see a lot of this country, and it's fun.
Now, let's take a look at what the weather looks like on the West Coast, starting on the West Coast. Here's Y2K. What does it look like at the CNN Weather Center?
Well, we have the complete global weather picture here for you. We have the entire world's weather. In fact, here we have Y2K weather up to around the west coast of America. They're still in old 1999 weather. Let me take a close look at that west coast and see how it's looking here. Here we have our temperatures. Not too bad, fairly mild for Los Angeles, coming up for the next half hour or so. San Francisco there, 46 Fahrenheit, 7 Celsius. Getting cooler as we head up to Vancouver. I'll put some cloud cover on there, and you can see that some of the pyrotechnics might be a little bit difficult to see. A little bit of that cloud just moving in to that northwest Pacific coastline. Elsewhere around the world, though, we are looking at weather coming up for the first day of the new year and the new century. Certainly for Japan, we're seeing clear weather, a sunny start for Tokyo, snow pushing into Beijing, possibly so some cooler temperatures there, but India looking rather warm and hot and hazy, very pleasant for January the 1st, 2000. Let's look at those forecast temperatures then coming up both in Fahrenheit and in centigrade as we are marking an international celebration. Mumbai there, 32. Tokyo 9 Celsius, Seoul 12 Celsius or 54 Fahrenheit. Moving on into Australia, fairly quiet picture. Apart from the west coast, some possible showers there and also a little bit of rain moving in here. That may develop into something a little bit more serious. We'll certainly be keeping you in touch with that. And then elsewhere for New Zealand, things aren't too bad for both the North Island and the South Island, just off there to the edge of your screen. How are those forecast temperatures looking like for January the 1st? Again, we're looking at Perth, very warm there, 35 Celsius. Alice Springs, 96 Fahrenheit or 35 Celsius, and Darwin there at 32 Celsius or 90 Fahrenheit. Moving on into the UK and into Europe, they have seen some very strong storms over the last week. A bit of a respite and mild weather for the Millennium celebrations, but we are seeing some wet, windy weather moving into the UK, into Scandinavia as well. And fairly fair weather, certainly for Paris and over to Berlin. That's your weather for now, the world weather look. Back to you, Bernard and Judy.
Thank you, Femi. Christiane Amanpour was reporting rain in London as we saw the Millennium arrive there.
And she was, and if you as you looked at that map, as Femi was pointing out, it looks like half of Great Britain is in experiencing inclement weather. We've done a lot of talking, Bernie, tonight and this morning about time, the passage of time, time as at midnight as it races around the globe, but time not only as it applies to the world, but also as it applies to our own lives. More on the passing of time from CNN's Candy Crowley.
Like, how did they start the millennium? How did they start the New Year's?
Marking time, one of life's most precise activities, until you live it.
It sort of seems like I was born a long time ago, but then if you just think back, it seems like you were born just a couple of minutes ago, because it's like it hasn't been that long since you were, well, it's been long, but then you think back and it seems like it hasn't been.
The truth is, 8 years is a long time, if that's the oldest you've ever been.
When I was born, World War I was only 9 months old. And there's been a lot of history ever since then. And it's just a great life. Just keep living. That's my point. Don't stop.
A funny thing about the clock, just when you learn to tell time, you start to understand that it doesn't tell you much.
When you're having fun, it goes slow because you're having, wait a minute. Yeah, when you're having fun, it goes slow because you get to play a lot and you feel like you get to play a whole bunch. But when you're not having fun, no, wait a minute. When you're not having fun, it goes slow. And when you're having fun, it goes quick.
Trains run by the clock. People run on something more forgiving, something that defies the tick-tock of an hour, a day, a year. People run on lifetime, and it is ever out of sync with clock time.
It seems just like yesterday you were just like in first grade.
I can't believe I've been here already 61 years, going on 62, and I'm ready for retirement.
Clock time never changes, 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours to a day. Lifetime can stand still.
Oh, a couple hours seems real long to me.
And at the other end of lifetime, it flies.
When we go into the Smithsonian and places like that, and you see things that have happened in 1931 and 34 and things, and I realize that 35 was my birthday, you know. And when my daughter tells me that I can't throw anything away because it might be an antique.
Clock time is measured by the sweep of a hand. Lifetime is measured by the feel of the soul.
Oh, yes, yes, because I think I'm still 25.
Yes, very hard to realize age in relation to what you really think about.
Lifetime is measured by the face of a child.
I'll tell you when it dawns on you, when you're young, when you're married, you have babies, and one day you look up and they're all gone.
The father in Fiddler on the Roof sang about lifetime at his daughter's wedding. I don't remember growing older. When did they?
When you have 50-year-old children, why, you have a little more realization of time that's gone by.
Lifetime connects us to the ages for the time when clock time runs down.
I feel like a bridge. My grandmother was born in 1884. My granddaughter was born in 1984. And I think it's wonderful that I'm in between there, and I knew my grandmother and my granddaughter. I think it's great.
Clock time tells us when to wake up, when to go to work, when to celebrate.
I can't believe that. I just can't believe it's actually 2000. I just can't. It's just such a, you know, something that we never look like it's going to happen.
And they have these little clocks that do countdowns. And if I had one in my room, I would try to speed it or just want to make it go quicker because it takes so long.
How late are you going to stay up?
12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. I would stay up all night.
Clock time is something you mark.
40 seconds.
Lifetime is something you experience.
Life is a lot of fun, and this is an order to you. Live it.
Candy Crowley, CNN, Washington.
Absolutely fascinating. Just fascinating.
It really is. If I can read just quickly, if you'll indulge me, from the end of a poem written by Robert Pinsky, the poet laureate, a toast for 2000. He says, as the centuries pass, past, present, and future, victims, villains, and heroes, each crosses the calendar border and disappears or lives in memory that numbers all the years. And my apologies for reading only a portion of this magnificent poem that deserves...
Apologies accepted. Very, very uplifting. A new millennium is approaching Western Canada and the United States when we come back.
This is CNN.
It is 2 minutes and 30 seconds to midnight Pacific Standard Time. The Millennium Sweep returns to the Pacific as CNN tracks 2000 to the west coast of North America.
But in Seattle, the celebration has been tempered by that city's concern about terrorism.
The new year makes a port call in Vancouver and San Francisco.
And it is starring in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. CNN continues its Millennium 2000 coverage right now.
In the upper left-hand corner of your screen, in the City of Angels, Los Angeles is counting down.
And in the upper right-hand corner, Las Vegas, the biggest party in town, we're told, a downtown light show and concert covering 4 city blocks.
And from Nob Hill to the waterfront, this is San Francisco.
And finally, Vancouver, the westernmost big city in our neighbor to the north, Canada. First night, a family-oriented, we are told, alcohol-free event.
Everyone counting backwards now as the new millennium hits the western United States and Canada.
40 seconds to go until these 4 great cities in the rest of the Pacific time zone, and that includes the states of Washington, Seattle, the state of Oregon, California, and we're looking here at Nevada, and the westernmost portion of Canada. Countdown. Maybe we should be quiet and listen to what's going on. San Francisco.
Las Vegas watching these pictures and listening to the same sound that we're watching. Paul? And in Hollywood, Kira Phillips is there at that famous sign.
That's right, Bernie. You're looking live at the Hollywood sign where John Bryan is performing up on the stage. I don't know if you can see him. He's right between the L and the Y. First time ever for a live performer. There we go. We got a close shot of John Bryan. He's described as one of LA's hottest producers. Quirky King of Cool is actually his nickname. Recently, he put the polishing touches on Fiona Apple's new album. He also did the score for the new film Magnolia. And he's a very popular session musician here in LA. A lot of people know his name. He's worked with a wide range of artists, from Melissa Etheridge to 9 Inch Nails. I don't know if you can hear him or not. Can you hear him singing, Bernie?
Paul Verkaman, what's the mood there in Las Vegas too?
Well, in Las Vegas, they say it's a city of great hedonism. It's just sheer exuberance here. One of the newest hotels in Las Vegas is the Paris, and the Eiffel Tower here sort of simulated a giant champagne bottle that was being uncorked for all the world to see. The top of it was spouting all sorts of sparks and confetti and fireworks. There are a lot of people right now in Las Vegas who are, for lack of a better term, partying on the street, but there's an awful lot of people indoors, some 1,300 of them, in fact, indoors watching Barbra Streisand right now. And I'm at the Four Seasons, very close to the Mandalay Bay. Next door, you've got Bette Midler performing and a myriad of other concerts. So it's sort of a dual-pronged party here with a lot of the revelers out there having a good time and many other people taking in their favorite artist, not the least of which, of course, is Barbra Streisand, with some of those tickets going for up to $2,500 a pop. And I have to tell you, I was in the Barbra Streisand show briefly, and I watched some of it. And when she appeared, it had the feeling of not so much a music concert, but a football game. When she stepped onto that stage, the MGM just exploded, and there was this roar. She went into her routine. She looked fit as a fiddle, and everybody inside that concert hall, I'll tell you, was telling me that they got their money's worth. A lot of A-list stars there, including Rod Steiger and Paul Rodriguez, some big movers and shakers from Hollywood, studio types that also showed up. So Las Vegas is living up to its reputation as a fun city right now, Bernie, as the people are, as I said, on the street and in the various casinos, and they're whooping it up in fine tradition.
Okay, Paul Verkaman, as we look at San Francisco.
And in San Francisco, we're hearing maybe you could call it more ethereal music. And on location for CNN, our own Greg Lefebvre. Greg, is there something going on at the Golden Gate Bridge?
Well, the Golden Gate Bridge was a very quiet affair, as we learned earlier this year when the city canceled its plans to host a fireworks show at the Golden Gate Bridge. The early stories were that there wasn't enough money in the public coffers to come up with such a celebration, and so the celebrations were concentrated to the one you see here along the Embarcadero, the central point of San Francisco's waterfront. There you see the clock tower at the Ferry Building, a very famous landmark on the waterfront at San Francisco. A beautiful night in San Francisco. Fog was threatening the skies, and a very potent and familiar weather condition there in the Bay Area. But as you can see, the fog certainly hasn't affected the folks down there along the Embarcadero, enjoying themselves as the fireworks and the music play on. Judy?
Well, Greg, I don't know whether to trust the information I have. I'm sorry about that, about the Golden Gate reference. We also were told that there was the world's largest martini glass that was going to be illuminated on the 7th story of the Westin St. Francis Hotel with a giant olive that was going to drop several stories. Am I wrong about that, too?
You're right. The rumors were true, and there were plans indeed. But then in the plaza below at Union Square, it clashed with a theme. Down in Union Square below the St. Francis Hotel was to be an alcohol-free peace rally. And the folks at the St. Francis Hotel, an historic old place in San Francisco, decided that perhaps it was not necessarily appropriate to have both of those events at the same time, and so they canceled the Martini.
Greg, I'm wondering how much of this reticence to really open up the city coffers had to do with the fact that you had a runoff in the elections, and then you had the second election for the mayor's race.
You know, I think it distracted an awful lot of people. There was a lot of money that went into both of those campaigns. There perhaps might have been a question about who would be the leader of the city while all this was going on. But the bottom line is the bottom line, and you can only afford so many parties in a city like San Francisco. Remember, the whole town is only 7 miles by 7 miles. But two large events are going on in the city. Of course, the one you see here along the Embarcadero, and then the other event at Union Square. Two big parties with perhaps tens of thousands of people in each. That pretty much straps the city's resources, and the folks around town figured it was a pretty wise decision to limit it to these two events.
Well, it looks pretty spectacular from where Bernie and I are sitting. With
the town indeed knows how to throw a party.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is the Y2K storyline out of your city?
The Y2K storyline is we probably should enjoy the fireworks because there is not much of a Y2K story.
All right, Greg Lefebvre, and look at that. In San Francisco, they may have cut back, but it still looks pretty, pretty spectacular. To another city now where there was even more of a cutback in celebrations because of concerns about security. The city, Seattle, our correspondent, Rusty Dornan. Rusty.
Well, Judy, there was quite a cutback. They were supposed to have a millennial bash of 50,000 people in and around the Space Needle. Now, the Space Needle, of course, was the landmark of the city. It was built during the World's Fair in 1962. It symbolizes the future of Seattle, also the coming of age of Seattle. So when it was canceled, it was a big disappointment to many people in Seattle. However, the fireworks go on as they do every year. And it was a very short but spectacular firework display, as you can see. In the beginning, they had even tried to spell out the year 2000 from the top of the dome. Now, in many years, they have fog that obscures the top of the dome, which has been a problem. This year, as you can see, it was clear, it was beautiful. People did gather around the outside of the Space Needle on the streets. The police were preventing people from gathering in any large crowds. But I don't think there were any problems in dispersing people. In the area we were, there were maybe a few hundred people. We could hear people screaming from around us. So we do know that they were probably scattered around the area and also in the hills all around Seattle. They have a very good vantage point of the Space Needle. But of course, Seattle did cut back on its big Millennium Bash due to possible threats of terrorism and of course on the heels of the violence that occurred during the World Trade Organization protests. So a lot of the Seattleites stayed home, came out at the last minute to see the fireworks, but were disappointed they couldn't have a giant party like so many of the other places in the world to ring in the new millennium. Judy?
All right, Rusty Dornan, thank you very much from Seattle.
And from there, we roll on to Hollywood once again. Here's Kira Phillips.
Hey, I'm pretty excited. I can say I spent New Year's with Jay Leno.
Oh, boy, Paris and Bethlehem, they really paled in comparison to our sign, huh?
Hey,
8 floodlights from the Home Depot.
Oh, it's 416 lighting experts. Come on, Jay, give us a break.
There may be 416 lighting experts out here, but they're not up there. Look at that, look at that.
Well, why didn't you get up
and sing? It looks like all naked inside. Look at that, this looks like a strip joint.
Hey, this is from you. This is from Rick Kaplan, our president.
Rick, thank you very much. But I didn't realize I had to take a drug test to get in here.
Hey, listen, what have you done all night besides Kai's trouble?
Oh, it's just been fun. New Year's Eve, you're just in Seattle, which is looked. Now, did they have theirs or didn't they?
Yeah, of course they did. Everybody was having a celebration.
Because I know
you saw.
so many terrorists had to cancel. They were all stuck at the airport and they couldn't fly out. They had to change flights. It was terrible. You know, they canceled something at the last minute and everybody's got to make other plans.
Did you rehearse this monologue?
No, I did not.
Oh, you didn't know we were going to have you with us.
Well, you know who's got the best party? Bin Laden. Boy, that is the hot party.
Have you been hanging out with Osama again?
No, because nobody is going to pull anything because he's, you know, that's where it's all happening.
He's taking away the limelight. Now look at this. How can you say that's not spectacular?
That's pretty spectacular, isn't it? Oh, man. I like when they release the doves in Bethlehem. They released 2,000 doves and then fireworks. Whose idea was that? The NRA? I mean, it looked like the doves are going, hey, it's a trick. They're trying to kill us. I mean, the doves are getting blown up in midair.
I need some help here. Anybody? Help?
You see Vatican City? The Pope lit an M80. I couldn't believe it.
Here, I'm going to give you the mic. You just kind of take
here
over.
you go. No, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're not drinking?
Oh, look at the time. I've got to run. Oh.
What are you doing next?
Next, I'm going to go home and watch the Dukes of Hazzard marathon on TBS.
Wait a minute. Okay.
This is the cheesiest New Year's Eve.
So this is the funnest you've had then so far.
This is the funnest I've had? Oh, my God. Is this one of the gooder interviews?
Yes, don't you think? Isn't this stimulating?
Oh, what fun this is. It is stimulating.
Do you have a message for Ted Turner, by the way?
For Ted? Well, no, actually, I don't.
Oh, now he gets serious.
No, I don't have a message for Ted, actually. I've been trying to get Ted on the Tonight Show. Ted, come on. Come on, I did your cheesy network. Come on ours.
All right, give us a break. How are your ratings, by the way?
Very good. That's why I can afford to say this stuff.
Now, Bernie and Judy have a lot better ratings.
You know my
what
favorite thing about CNN? You know what I love about CNN?
What do you
my
love
favorite
about
thing?
CNN?
Whenever there's a hurricane or a disaster, they send out their fattest and baldest reporters. You ever notice that? When it's like a glamour story, it's always Wolf Blitzer, and then when there's like a...
Don't you rip on Wolf.
No, but then when there's like then when there's like some kind of rainstorm, there's one of those poor guys I never heard of chained to a pole in Miami. It's hysterical.
Judy, Bernie, can I have some help here, please?
Well, tell them the person changed the pole was at another network.
Wait a minute, Bernie, what was that message?
Crowley out there.
No, I said the person changed to the pole was at another network.
Oh, I got to go.
Yeah.
See you later.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Jay. You sure you don't want the champagne? All right. I think the mayor would have been a lot easier to interview you guys. Woo, I'm sweating right now.
Well, you know, he's a big fan of CNN.
Well, evidently so. A big fan of Kira's. You think he was auditioning for a job as a correspondent?
I've had a very good time. Maybe we should ask him, hey, you guys want to host this show? I'd love to get you on there.
Kira Phillips.
Oh,
I think he was a little too strong about that. I think that's a very nice sign behind you. So I would take exception with what Mr. Leno said.
Well, Leno is a marvelous host. You know that.
Yes.
We'll be back. Don't go away. The year 2000 in Las Vegas. In San Francisco, Greg Lefebvre has been at the Hewlett-Packard's Y2K Center. Let's check in with him.
Well, welcome to Y2 Not. It's been a marvelously, perilously fun, slow night here in Palo Alto, California, where the folks at Hewlett-Packard are running their Y2K command center. They are coordinating something like 100 offices in 50 different countries out of this room, checking to make sure that their systems and the systems of their customers roll over into the new year. We are now something like into 20 time zones already, and so far, not a glitch. With me is Brad Whitworth, who's been the honcho here since it was dark this morning. Brad, you guys have been taking some calls here. What are the kinds of calls you get?
Well, we've been tracking our customer calls, and there haven't been that many. We're finding that only about 3% of our total call volume is dealing with Y2K issues. A lot are just routine support calls that we might get from some of our biggest customers. And when you look at the consumer kinds of customers, the PCs in the home, it's an even smaller percentage. Less than 1% of our calls really deal with Y2K.
Now, I was hearing a story earlier today that in Singapore, the folks were calling you because they were bored because there wasn't enough call activity to begin with. Is that typical, or?
I think it's been a little bit of a slow day, and we've been looking for things to do as we've been monitoring websites. We've been talking to customers. We've been talking a lot to HP people all over the globe, trying to ascertain what, if any, Y2K issues really are emerging.
Now, your own company has something like 13,000 servers, 150,000 computers of your own. Over the 4 or 5 years you've been doing this, you're also trying to satisfy your customers and yourself. Doesn't that put a strain on things?
I would say if things got really hectic, it probably would have been a bit of an issue of allocating resources, but we made the decision early on that customers come first, and we were going to do everything we could, even on our internal systems, to make sure the ones we supported first were the ones that supported customers. We didn't have to make that choice, though, today because it's been pretty quiet.
Okay, Brad Whitworth, thank you very much. We are told also that this command center will stay on what they call high alert through Monday, which, of course, is the first big business day in the U.S., and then we'll pick up steam a little bit later on in February as we go into the new leap year calculations and possibly into the first week of March. But so far, it's been actually a fairly quiet night here, and for the folks in this company anyway, and the 100,000 or so that work here, a pretty thankful day as well. Bernie and Judy, back to you in Atlanta.
All right, Greg Lefebvre, thanks very much for that look from Palo Alto. Now to back to New York City, to Times Square, to Fred Hickman. Fred, any Y2K problems with sweeping the streets of New York?
Well, you know what, Judy? Interestingly enough, they have not come up with any sort of technical breakthrough that'll substitute for a good push broom and a bucket out here. And there's plenty of debris to get up. 4 tons of confetti was dumped off of these buildings, or shot out, actually, by some 150 confetti cannons. And now this massive cleanup is beginning. But you'll notice there's still quite a good crowd right around the Con Ed stage in the middle of Times Square as the celebrations do continue right through 6 a.m. Eastern time as we celebrate every time zone. It started early this morning, and the people have just not stopped. They're still here. They're still having a good time. Many are making their way home now, but we've also noticed that in addition to the cleanup crews here, the NYPD generator trucks that were out here, just in case, they had some special things set up. Had there been some sort of an emergency to get the people cleared out, a loudspeaker system and a whole evacuation system in place. None of that was necessary, so some of those guys are starting to pull out now. So indeed, it is winding down, but it has been just an incredible evening here, from the Waterford Crystal Ball coming down to you know, just all of the many people out here. They estimate somewhere around 2.5 million people were in Times Square tonight, all the way from 34th Street down to 59th Street, between 6th and 8th Avenues, just wall-to-wall people. And the great news, once again, I need to reiterate this, it was a police operation as well as, you know, just good planning. But the people here, the New Yorkers and the visitors, were so well-behaved and so full of love. We only had 14 arrests on the evening, and those were for minor offenses. So all in all, I think this has probably been one of the most raving successes, along with it being the largest party ever thrown in this particular part of New York ever. I don't know how they're going to top it quite, but it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Maybe not quite as much fun to clean up, but a lot of fun to watch.
Well, I have to tell you, though, you know, I'm a little bit envious because Lauren Sidney, I think, has been getting both of your attention. She's been giving you stuff all night, so I got you these. A couple of nice hats. I'll bring those back with me.
You better deliver on all this stuff, Fred.
Oh, I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. Glasses, the whole bit.
Fred Hickman, and then he rested. When we come back, more of our continuing live coverage, and this is how it looked in Las Vegas at the stroke of midnight and the year 2000.
CNN's global coverage of millennium.
The Great Pyramids of Egypt, sunrise over that part of northeastern Africa, the African continent. The pyramids built 2,000 years, 2,500 years before the birth of Christ. In fact, we are reminded that the pyramids are the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. This is a remarkable sight indeed. So that's what it looks like right now at sunrise, Bernie. For a look back at what it felt like and looked like when midnight hit that part of the world, let's go to CNN's own Ben Wiedemann. Ben.
The star of the show at Egypt's top millennium celebration never showed up. The Pyramid of Cheops, the biggest of Giza's pyramids, remained shrouded in a thick desert mist. The other pyramids barely got in the act. The fog also made it impossible for French composer Jean-Michel Jarre to show off his famed laser graphics. He compensated by firing off a steady stream of fireworks. Security was rushed, and it appeared the emphasis was on keeping the festivities dry.
I'm not allowed to bring in my whiskey again.
You're what?
With most Egyptians observing the holy month of Ramadan, the government banned the consumption of alcohol at the concert. But the ban and the bad weather did little to dampen the enthusiasm of a very international and predominantly young crowd, each celebrating the beginning of the new millennium in their own unique way. There are parties around the world, says this man from Milan, but the best is here at the pyramids.
The music, there's life. Everybody's happy, and it's obviously a very difficult area, a lot of conflict in the region, but you have a feeling that this one night you're going to have 60,000 people from around the world all here to celebrate and have a good time.
And for one Egyptian, a chance to see a national monument.
To see the pyramids, and I didn't see the pyramids just 1 or 2 times.
While 2 Israelis just savored a special night out in what was once enemy territory.
I always want to be in Egypt. You know, Israel, we have 2 wars with Egypt. And for me, it's like the fruit of peace to come here, to sit here with a big smile.
For a few brief hours here in the desert, Egypt was able to bring together a kaleidoscope of colors and cultures, a fitting way to begin a new millennium. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Giza, Egypt.
The celebration of celebrations around the world, and our live coverage continues. One of the other concerns, of course, was the possibility of a Y2K disruption. So far, minimal, virtually non-existent, but of course you have people going back to work on Monday. We'll see what that brings.
Bernie, you know, there are just so many things that you and I have known for some time that we were going to be here tonight, and we both made it a point to collect little bits of information that might be interesting as we think back. We're not only observing the end of a millennium, we're observing the end of a century, and I just thought I'd share 2 or 3 predictions that didn't quite turn out. One was a man named Charles Duell. He was the U.S. Commissioner of Patents in 1899, 100 years ago in a day, and he said at one point, everything that can be invented has been invented. He was a Commissioner of Patents. Nikita Khrushchev, we all remember this one. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you.
Yes.
And my favorite prediction from Daryl Zanuck, the film producer, in 1946, on the future of television, he said, people will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night.
Well, I don't think anyone is tired if you've been watching CNN around the world for the last 23, 24 hours, and our coverage will not end. We still have more time zones to go through as they get ready to go out to the Pacific. One thing about this Y2K, just to keep in perspective, as our coverage unfolds over coming days and coming weeks, as some people are indicating that there might be problems down the road. Talk about things that could go wrong. Teller machines, 1% to 2% of the 227,000 ATM machines in the United States are down or out of cash at any given moment. Railroads, just over 4 rail accidents a year on New Year's Day. And this one, things that go wrong with 911 systems. Public telephone network connections to 911 emergency centers fail somewhere in the United States nearly every week.
And we leave you, as we go to a break, with one other interesting thing that I think you need to remember, that it is 24,902 miles around the Earth at the center, the equator. So that's how far the Earth has had to turn in order for the world to get from 1999, all the world will have to have gotten from 1999 to the year 2000. We're not there yet. We've still got, what, Bernie, a little less than, what, 2.5 hours before Samoa, the last place in this 25-hour marathon, gets it. And we also found that if you're at the middle of the planet, the Earth travels at 1,038 miles an hour. We're going to get a quiz on this in just a minute.
When we come back, Santana, Champagne, right here. Don't go away.
This is CNN.
light the corners of my mind, misty watercolor memories of the way we were.
Barbra Streisand, one of the hotter and costlier tickets in the Millennium celebrations in Las Vegas. Still there, still alert is our Paul Verkaman. The Las Vegas skyline as it looks right now. Paul, what's the latest?
Well, while we're waiting for Paul Verkaman, we know he's there. There's just a little audio glitch. We'll get back to him in just a minute. We want to share some thoughts with you, Bernie. How many bubbles in a bottle of champagne?
I don't know.
In a regular-sized bottle, 49 million bubbles. Not because I counted. What would a New Year's celebration be without champagne? Well, this year, many revelers are forgetting the cost when they're ringing in the new year. After all, 2000 is a vintage milestone. Our CNN's Carolyn O'Neill looks at what separates good champagne from the best.
The sparkle of champagne has become synonymous with celebration.
Oh, it tickles the nose.
That's right, it's got to be the bubbles.
Exactly.
It's the bubbles. Somehow other bubbles bring celebration to mind.
And this New Year's Eve, whether the celebration is on a rooftop in New York, a beach in Bali, or next to the fire at home, more people are expected to enjoy champagne and open the good stuff. For many, that means true champagne from the Champagne region of France.
Everybody is buying a special bottle to drink either with dinner or to crack open at midnight.
Older vintages, especially 1990 champagnes, are in high demand, but expect higher prices too.
And you're going to have layers of flavor that are not existent in a young champagne. That doesn't mean that the young is not good, it's just different.
Elegant, but often less expensive than their French cousins, sparkling wines produced in California, Spain, and other wine-growing regions are great choices for New Year, too. But no matter which bottle you choose to open, be careful. The cork holds in about 90 pounds of pressure. First, make sure the bottle is very cold.
So I turn the cork one way and the bottle the other. And as I do so, I start to feel the cork want to escape. Now I'm holding it in. I'm keeping it from going outside the bottle because I want it to come out with a soft sigh rather than a loud pop. Because if I pop the cork, then I lose the bubbles to the atmosphere, and I'd rather them be inside the wine. So I just let it out with a soft hiss. And then, if you've done it correctly, you can open your bottles hours before your guests arrive, put them back in the ice, and they'll still keep the bubbles.
For stemware, a flute or tulip shape is best because the small opening helps keep the bubbles in. And pour slowly so it doesn't fizz up over the top. You don't want to waste a precious drop.
New Year's Eve is not for sipping, it's for drinking. And I think we're all going to do that.
And remember, champagne isn't just for Millennium Midnight.
I mean, make that your New Year's resolution to let champagne be a part of your life on a more frequent basis, because in my opinion, if the sun rises, that's an occasion for champagne. Really, it's always going to make your life better.
Carolyn O'Neill, CNN, New York.
Music is very important to our lives. Paul Verkaman, back in Las Vegas. Paul.
Yes, I'm back here, Bernie. Thank you. Sorry, I think my mic had a very low-tech problem earlier. Maybe it was just plain tired. But the people in this city are tireless behind me on Las Vegas Boulevard, the Strip, concerts all up and down the Strip, and also in other places. In fact, Carlos Santana, who sold some 6 million copies of one record this year, is playing at the Hard Rock Cafe, and I caught up with him earlier today to talk about all of his recent success. I'm Paul Verkaman here at the Hard Rock Cafe in Las Vegas with our special guest, Carlos Santana, who will be performing tonight. How does it feel to ring in the new millennium?
I feel very grateful. It's an incredible opportunity to be part and parcel of this movement that is it's very vibrant, it's very alive, you know, and I just feel really grateful. It's a real honor.
How did you pick the Hard Rock in Las Vegas?
We sort of picked each other. You know, 2 years ago, I had a vision of doing something different, which now PBS is doing it, which is showing the millennium as it's happening around the world. But since it wouldn't get off the ground, so we decided to do something more intimate, like in here, and just play for our real families and our fans, close fans. But it's, you know, like I said, I'm really grateful.
You're also grateful for this year. 6 million copies sold of Supernatural. The album's on a roll. What do you attribute all of this to, do you think?
It's timing. It's really God's grace. My wife is the one that really set the wheels in motion towards where we are today. She had this conviction for us to hook up with Mr. Clyde Davis. And of course, Mr. Clyde Davis, he believed in us like he did in the beginning. And he just presented me with options and possibilities and opportunities, venues, if you will. He kept calling and said, you know, Lauryn Hill really loves your music, you know, and she would love to play with you. Are you open to working with her, or Mr. Dave Matthews, or like that, Rob Thomas? And but it's really my wife who said, you know, follow this course over here, and so I want to give her all the credit, because she's the one that saw the big picture, and you know, and it's quite a phenomena, the way this music is grabbing a hold of people's hearts of all generations. You know, Abraxas before did it with, you know, you can go to a hut in Timbuktu or Africa, or go to Jerusalem and see Palestinians and Hebrews. But now with Supernatural, it's taking a whole new dimension appropriated for the millennium. It's like it's bringing that adagio of all is one, you know, and we're different, but all is one, and we're honoring it.
Well, we thank you so much for taking time out, and good luck to you, and Happy New Year, and thanks for providing all the musical pleasure to all of our viewers around the world.
Take care. Peace.
Now back here live in Las Vegas, the revelry continues, a city that has been electrified tonight by many performances, including that of Carlos Santana and Bette Midler, and of course Barbra Streisand, with some of those tickets going for $2,500 a seat. Now back to you, Bernie, in Atlanta.
Thank you very much, Paul. And when we come back, live in Los Angeles, the Eagles. You won't want to miss them.
$22.98 for 2 cassettes, or $24.98.
As Alaska prepares to usher in 2000 in just a few moments. And Juanita Phillips and Brian Netzel will see us into the new year as the New Year celebrations move back towards where they began almost a day ago.
Much more to come, but Bernie and I, for our part, will call it a night. It's been unforgettable. I think that's fair to say.
Yep.
We've enjoyed it, but we do leave you now with another classic from the Eagles, their signature song, Hotel California. Stay with us.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is in.
And it's just 2 minutes to midnight in the nation's 49th and largest state. The patient people of Alaska finally get their turn to cheer after watching a party for the ages around the world.
CNN has spent nearly 24 hours covering the Millennium's arrival, and we will look back even as we move ahead.
Anchorage is already celebrating with the fireworks just about to start.
And Fairbanks is doing the same. They even partied a little on Diomede Island, once a Cold War outpost. CNN's extensive coverage of Millennium 2000 continues right now.
Well, we've been on an incredible journey these past 24 hours around the world. It's not quite over yet. Time now to take a look at the last major city in North America to welcome in the new year. Anchorage, Alaska canceled some of its planned celebrations because it's too cold and foggy there.
With temperatures at -8 degrees, many Alaskans decided to stay home rather than attend the planned fireworks display.
Now we're looking at some live pictures coming in now from Anchorage, Alaska. People there counting down to midnight. It's just 10 seconds to go. And we're seeing the fireworks have just started. We did hear that they might have been delayed for a while, but seems like at least some of the fireworks did start to go off then. Let's listen in. That drumming is apparently the traditional way of welcoming in the new year.
They're partying heavily in Anchorage, Alaska right now. The temperature, as we said, is about -8 degrees, but with a 15-mile-an-hour wind chill, it brings it down to about -40 degrees. And so it might be fair to say that some of those people were jumping around just to keep warm.
I think they were. I think they had their winter woolies on there. Yes, the 49th state of the USA, one of the last places on the planet to welcome in the new millennium. We still have a couple of hours left to go. As I said, the last 24 hours we've been on a journey right across the planet as the various peoples and nations of the world welcome in the new millennium.
Also, let's now go take you to Los Angeles, where Kira Phillips is standing by in the aftermath of the Millennium 2000 celebrations in that city. Hello, Kira. Have you calmed down from your last interview?
No. Did you catch that interview with Jay Leno?
I certainly did. It was great. Jay Leno.
I'm glad. I think we're all panicking out here. We're all wondering if our pink slips are going to come in tomorrow after that one. Whoo, baby,
No.
I tell you what.
Well, you got the sign lit up behind you. That's a good sign.
That's right. Let me tell you what's going on. You can see the lights actually are still in full force. The mayor's asked to keep them on for a little while longer. It took 3 weeks, believe it or not, to get all that up there. The 400 lights, 16 experts of a lighting crew with the lasers, and it was all computerized, too. It wasn't just a matter of flipping switches. It was all done by computer, so it was very high tech. Now I understand it's going to take 2 weeks to tear it all down, so everyone's still going to be working in full force even through the new year. Now, early on today, or early on this evening rather, Mayor Reardon came out along, well, here you go. Here's the video of when midnight struck and the sign lit up. Mayor Reardon and Jay Leno came and flipped the switch and set everything off. Now, we didn't have fireworks, and the reason why is because there's been a lot of fires in Southern California recently. You may recall the coverage all in the past week, and it was very ironic because we had rain today and things cooled down, but that is the reason why we didn't have any fireworks. It was just a light spectacular, and this coincided with a whole bunch of celebrations that happened throughout the day, cultural celebrations in all different neighborhoods and all throughout the city, and then everything was interlinked via satellite. So there were huge video screens at all the celebrations so you could enjoy everything. Well, it looks like, Brian, we're going to take a look at that interview we had with Jay Leno. Here you go.
You know what I love about CNN?
What do you love about
CNN? Whenever there's a hurricane or a disaster, they send out their fattest and baldest reporters. You ever notice that? When there's like a glamorous story, it's always Wolf Blitzer. And then when there's like a...
Don't you rip on Wolf.
No, but then when there's like then when there's like some kind of rainstorm, there's one of those poor guys I never heard of chained to a pole in Miami.
I tell you what, he has no heart. I'm going to say that right now. And he already admitted that CNN gets much better ratings than his show does anyway, guys. So I hope you take the rest of the new year in. Have a great time. We had a blast out here, and Happy New Year from all of us here in Los Angeles.
Thank you. You too, Kira. By the way, some of those entertainment shows still underway. Jimmy Buffett and the Eagles, have they all wrapped up?
That's right. Yes, that is all wrapped up. That took place down at the Staples Convention Center, and we showed a little bit of the Eagles not too long ago, and that's all wrapped up also. So things are calming down here in the city. No big problems to report. Y2K, the city is calm. It's gone very well.
And Kira, it's a big party city. Any big showbiz parties still continuing?
Rumor has it down at Paramount Studios, they still got a big shindig going on. I don't know. I'm trying to talk the crew into going down there and checking it out. Otherwise, no, everything's pretty much settled down.
Okay, thanks, Kira. Kira Phillips in Los Angeles. Now we want to take you to Las Vegas, where Paul Verkaman is standing by with the aftermath of the celebrations in that city, where people are taking a big bet on the new year. Paul?
I'll tell you what, Brian, Juanita, they may call New York the city that never sleeps, but perhaps they should call Las Vegas the city that never went to bed in the first place. if you look around and behind me, just to make sure that none of the merrymakers become mischief makers, on the tops of many of the hotels and high structures, the police department has positioned some spotters, and they will try to make sure that nobody gets out of hand. Now, inside the hotels, a lot of huge acts. We talked about Barbra Streisand and Carlos Santana, and Bette Midler, with her trademark voice, ushered in the new year with her own version of New Year's merriment.
Come on, everybody, sing it with me. You know almost, I know how it goes. Thank you so much. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of golden time? For old lang syne, my dears, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness here for old
The divine Miss M, wishing everyone a very happy new millennium. And as you look behind me, as we said before, a lot of concerts here tonight. I should let you know that I'm on the 35th floor with a punched out window. That's why you can see things so clearly. And I'm at the Four Seasons Hotel. Throughout this city, people continue to party it up. An interesting note about Las Vegas, back in the era of Prohibition, the old joke was, what Prohibition? This is also a city where you will not find too many mini bars in your hotel room because they would prefer that you have your libations down in the casino. And I'm sure many people, of course not us, are having their libations and saluting and drinking their champagne and continuing all the merriment here from Las Vegas. Back to you now, Juanita and Brian.
Paul, I got a question for you. One of the other things notable about Las Vegas is the absence of clocks, especially inside the casinos. So I know you were outside, but have you got any word about what the reaction was in many of the casinos? Did people even know it was midnight?
Well, as we described this earlier, there was almost two parties going on. On the street they did, because the huge monitors that the hotels have behind me counted down to the midnight. Now, as far as the clocks in the casinos, no, there were none. Many people did try to place those last-moment bets. Also, though, the people who were inside knew what time it was simply because people like Bette Midler broke into Old Lang Syne and other standards. Because you had so many people inside with the concerts at midnight, I think you indeed had less people on the street.
And, Paul, a lot of people were prepared, it seems, to pay top dollar for tickets to those big performances. I was hearing before that some people were paying something like $2,500 for a ticket to hear Barbra Streisand. I think Bette Midler about $1,500. Were those concerts sellouts?
I was inside the Barbra Streisand concert for a spell, and they tell me that it was sold out at 1,300 people. Midler, not exactly positive. I will tell you this, though. Some people who had earlier bought hotel packages, let's say back in May, who found out that some of the room rates had been reduced or package rates were reduced, made calls to that hotel and got some of their money rebated back. And they were happy for that. They were just glad that they asked as well. Juanita, Brian?
Paul, one last question. Since you were inside the Barbra Streisand concert, there was some rumor that this might be her last concert. Have you heard anything concrete about that?
Well, I actually saw her personal publicist, and he made no mention of that. She does have a concert here tomorrow night, and whether she decides to perform again remains to be seen. I will tell you, and these are some numbers that are out there, this has been a very, very lucrative concert for Barbra Streisand, and certainly she might be encouraged to do it again. While I was in there, she made no mention of a fond farewell or the final concert or anything like that.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That is Paul Verkammen in Las Vegas, where they celebrated and gambled in the new year. The celebrations were also in Seattle, but they were a little muted in that city after the officials there canceled party plans over concerns of terrorism. But that didn't stop a spectacular fireworks display from lighting up the night sky around the city's famous Space Needle. However, fences kept crowds from gathering on the grounds surrounding the monument. Officials said they wanted to take no chances after learning the needle could be a potential target for terrorists. And fireworks added even more sparkle to the bright lights of the hotels and casinos of Las Vegas, as we said. The city living up to its reputation as a place to see some of the top names in entertainment. Again, as we said, Barbra Streisand, Elton John, Bette Midler among the performers headlining there. Tickets for the Streisand concert costing up to $2,500 apiece. And we will, well, we've already brought you part of her performance. I think we're going to bring you a little more a little later, and it will be free of charge. In Calgary, Alberta, the Olympic flame atop Calgary Tower lit the way for revelers at Olympic Plaza, those who braved the chilly weather in Calgary to celebrate a parade of lanterns and lights in the downtown part of the town. The now familiar themes of fireworks and partying in the streets were there as well.
Well, instead of celebrating, and maybe as well as celebrating, thousands of people around the world were also keeping a close eye on computers this New Year's Eve. And some minor problems are being reported, but officials say it's unclear whether they're related to the Y2K computer bug. The United States Federal Aviation Administration had said that an automated weather observation system had failed, but now the FAA says those earlier reports were erroneous. The Pentagon, meanwhile, says a military intelligence communication system stopped working properly, but that's being called a, quote, temporary interruption. And in Japan, officials say a possible Y2K glitch shut down a radiation alarm system at a nuclear power plant, but there were no leaks or safety problems. Experts say that the real test for Y2K may be on Monday, when banks and businesses resume normal hours. Well, CNN's Charles Feldman is at the Los Angeles Y2K Command Center. Charles, any problems being reported at your end?
Rita, not a thing. Actually, things have worked out very smoothly here, and it was very obvious early on in the evening as the millennium was ushered in all across the United States that there were no apparent Y2K problems, no apparent terrorism problems, the two main things that everybody was very concerned about as we went from 1999 to the year 2000. We're going to show you a picture now of the Emergency Operations Center, which is the room right behind me. It is 4 floors beneath the City Hall complex here in downtown Los Angeles. It has been on its highest level of preparedness for several hours now. That was all planned. These are people representing various departments and city agencies in Los Angeles, here to monitor, again, everything from any Y2K glitches to any other unforeseen events that would require fire or police action or some other emergency maneuvers, if you will, by different departments of the city. But so far, everything has been so quiet that it appears as if this high level of preparedness is going to be stepped down considerably in the next couple of hours. And so far, the year 2000, at least for Los Angeles, is smooth sailing. Happy New Year, both of you.
All right, same to you, Charles. That's
Thanks,
good
Phil.
news. Charles Feldman there at the Y2K Command Center in Los Angeles. And we're going to be back after a short break with a new year and a new political beginning for Russia. We'll have more on that story, but we're going to leave you now with more pictures from Anchorage, Alaska, and the celebrations there.